Hi,
Hi.
hi, Uttam. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. So, yesterday we ended with lots of forks of ideas, lots of tangents actually in our hands.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and today, and then we kind of decided to just give it time and let it develop across the next day, flowing in with today's topic, which is, the other.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we know the other? Is knowing the other as the negative space of ourselves, is that an idea that works, or are there is the other not just in relation to ourselves and is something by itself too?
Space, you mean like self and others are mutually exclusive? Is it what you mean?
Right, right. So in the sense, if you think about who am I, then you are who you are not, right?
Right. Right.
I mean,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, you are the negative space of who you are not, right?
Right. Right. So, I mean, I don't know if it aligns with the negative space idea, but I think like the self, I mean, others can be a reflection of yourself, like not
A reflect,
totally.
not an inverted reflection. You're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Dhruv.
Hey.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but why do you need to retain the idea, hold on to the idea that the other might not be an inverted reflection? So, in the sense that it could be all kinds of reflections. It could be n minus one or n minus 100 or n minus million, whatever, right? It could be
Right,
any configuration.
right. Or rather, I think it's others can be a
A reflection. What were you saying with it?
reflect like that.
No, I couldn't hear. Your voice was breaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I was just telling, others can be seen as a superimposition of all the reflections that they have interacted with in the past.
Right. But don't you think the other is anything on its own? Uh,
Um,
is it just in relation to the point of reflection that is ourself? Or,
right. I mean, the thing is, if for me, others is a very abstract concept because for me, you can be or people can be others, but for you, I will be others, right? So it's a very subjective point of view, and you can't define others objectively or if it stands on its own.
no, but if you take any body in the universe, if the body is looking at everything else, that's the other, right?
Right? Okay.
So there is always the self and the other.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Okay.
But I mean, I'm wondering if the other is just refined in relationship to ourselves, or is it something on its own?
Um, Again, I think it's definitely got to do with whatever the cliched example of four blind people trying to identify an elephant, right? So,
Right. No, but why would you say that? In the sense, you
I
are
say
a
that
person, your sense of the other, it's the same as my sense of the other.
no, it need not be. That's what I was saying. I think it's more of the. I think the person who's seeing has got a lot to do with how other is perceived as. Like the lens or the perspective. Um, so you don't really know what the other person is.
No, not the other
By
person, the other, the
the other, yeah, not
abstract,
the other person. I'm
the,
sorry, the other.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
abstract other.
yeah, the abstract other. So you don't really know what the abstract other is. It totally depends on the way you look at it. That's my point of view.
What do you think, JK?
I came into the conversation a little late. Can you give me some context?
Yeah, so yesterday we had this thought in our hands. How can we be ourselves,
Okay.
right? Uh, and then the topic for today.
Hello? Hello?
I think Prayas is having some issues with the
His
signal.
connection, is it? Okay.
Yeah, so you were asking what was today's topic, or you want like the recap of what we have done till now as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to recap.
We were trying to yesterday we were trying to define what self is,
Mm-hmm.
and to perceive others as, like,
Mm-hmm.
is others like the negative space of oneself, or what, like, how do you define others as?
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to answer right now.
Is Prayas back?
No, I don't think he is back, but Satya?
Yes, hi.
Oh, hi. So I was just trying to tell JK like what we've done yesterday and what our today's topic is. Would you like to add something? I was just telling how we try to define self. How do you define others and stuff?
Okay, I'm going to attempt. I think we talked about the self being a congregation of various selves, of various babes that come together as an envelope which has holes in it. We
Right.
also had talked about how the self could be perceived as a donut.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to put together these two concepts, and after that we came to discussing about how does the self realize itself, or how is the self viewed, where can the self be itself, and what is the space for it to be itself, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, we had that thought, and then we have today's topic, that is the other. So, is the other a negative space of ourselves? So we have these two things, right?
Okay.
Right.
And we were talking about, we were figuring if the other is the same for all of us, or it's defined always in relation to,
Self.
yeah, how the self observes it.
Okay. So when you say other, you're talking about an abstract concept here, right? So the other for let's say, for an example, the other for India as a nation would be all other nations. The other for me as an individual could be all other individuals. The other
Right.
for, let's say, one body part of mine could be the other body parts which constitute me. But consciousness at all those levels will determine what the other is, right?
Right. I mean, it's just the whole minus yourself, right?
Correct. Okay.
So the negative space is the whole.
Right. And looking at it that way, does it make it the same for all of us, or does it make it dependent on power dynamics again?
Can I make one comment? As you're talking about this, it just occurred to me that we're talking about this negative space being everything other than the self, right? And this is at all levels of consciousness, correct?
Right.
So I'm just making a statement out here that maybe the people that actually think about this and become realized souls, so to speak, are people that get rid of that negative space completely. So if you can keep moving out of reference frames, let's say I'm a human being, an individual right now. If I start looking at the whole animal kingdom as myself, for example,
Right.
then that lessens the negative space if there is an absolute boundary, right? And as I keep moving those reference frames, I become more and more realized, and therefore that negative space goes away. So sorry to quote a cliche here, but then as you keep doing that, you become one with everything, and there is no negative space at the end.
So what this process is precluded on the condition of wanting to realize oneself. So the compulsion is realization.
Correct.
But JK, does the negative space go away, or do we just become tolerant to it?
My guess is that if you're looking at, the general philosophy is that it's infinite, but it all looks the same, right? So, at one level of abstraction, it's futile to do this, because as you keep moving away from your reference frames, you'll find that there is still infinity out there. So there will always be a negative space. It will manifest itself in different ways. What I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah, because one of the things that we kind of accepted as a kind of rule of this conversation in the first few days was that if you can talk about things in a way that we can talk about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a way, so self-realization and infinity, and these things are at one level beyond the scope of conversation, in the sense they are almost mythical entities.
Okay.
Right. So, but what can we verify from personal experience, and by doing that, further the conversation that we are in, and so how would you break it down? So, if you break down the self-realization process, or other parts of what you described, how would you break it down?
Can I continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I get what you're saying about being able to wrap your hands around this problem. And okay, so let's talk about it from a purely individualistic point of view, saying, okay, as a human being, what is the negative space, right?
Right.
So one thought that occurred to me was, if I'm looking at it from a very non-philosophical space, I would say that the negative space is, one way of looking at negative space is the beliefs that you've left behind as you have matured or evolved. So that could be one way of looking at the negative space. Instead of looking at it as everything outside yourself, you could actually internalize this whole thing and say, as I have evolved over the last whatever years, I have left behind X, Y, and Z beliefs. And that is the negative space.
So that is the negative space of yourself.
Correct.
Would that negative space be the other?
I think you can extend the definition into that, because if you have left behind some beliefs, right, and you're holding on to some other beliefs now, if the sum total of this is the whole superset, then it's equivalent to what everyone else is holding on to. I'm not sure if I'm clear of what I'm saying.
What you left behind became part of the other.
I guess I'm trying to say that the beliefs that you have left behind as you have evolved today might be held by other people,
Right.
right? So the fact that you have
Right.
left those behind makes it your
But,
negative space.
but there are things held, their beliefs held by other people that you also never had, right?
That's also true. Correct.
So
But it's a
that's that.
superset, no?
Yeah, it will intersect, but it won't be as a set. It won't contain entirely the
I'm sorry, I said it's a superset. So
superset. Right.
yeah.
That's correct.
Oh, I heard intersect.
Yeah, and then I started thinking about intersection.
Dhruv,
Yeah.
what would you add to this?
Okay. So as JK looked at the negative space as something, as like set of beliefs, those I left behind as I grew up. I was looking at negative space as something as in totally physical connotations, like the space, a 3D space minus me. For example, consider a chessboard as the universe, and I am a piece on a chessboard occupying one cell out of 64. So, in that sense, the remaining 63 cells would be the negative space of mine, and hence
Right.
the pieces those occupy those rest of the cells would be others for me. And what I would like to add here is my position or my cell in that universe would definitely determine my take on the others, as in how close others are to me or how far away they are from me. That would definitely make an impact of what others are to me. As in that context, I'll say that others is not something totally objective. It also
Uh-huh.
depends on how I perceive them.
Now, how
Uh,
does it depend on? How does it also depend on how you perceive them? Like you described this chessboard and you described all the other cells except the cell in which you are positioned,
yeah,
and I understood that. But how does that? I mean, it depends on your position, sure.
yeah.
So
Uh,
you're saying that what you can see depends on where you are.
yeah, precisely. As in,
I think, sorry, Dhruv, may I add one point?
yeah, sure.
I think Dhruv is trying to tell that how the threat to a piece depends on where it is. Like if it is like in the weak spot, like where a horse can attack the whatever pawn or your piece.
Hmm.
So it actually depends on where exactly, like spatially, it is located. So that
Yeah,
makes you look at things differently. I think Dhruv is coming from that point of view.
yeah.
Can I
So,
jump in and extend the chessboard analogy?
Right.
I mean, I'm glad that Dhruv brought it up because it just occurred to me that if you define the negative space as the rest of the 63 spaces,
Mm-hmm.
then there is also this additional thing of the more you travel in those 63 spaces, the more you realize what the negative spaces are. Because you might be in one cell at a given moment, right?
right.
But if you look at life experience as moving through that chessboard and taking those risks of being attacked by someone else, etc., it's when you encounter those risks that you actually realize what the real negative space around you is.
Right. Right.
I want to add to that saying that Dhruv had talked about perception, and if I were one of those chess pieces, I would not even have thought about perceiving the others or where I am in that chessboard to have a strategic importance. What I'm trying to say is how I perceive myself on the chessboard also has a meaning, also adds to how I construct how the chessboard is. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, for some it might appear like the other is a strategy to go through. For me, it didn't even occur to me that there is a strategy to this chessboard. So there's a difference in perception of the other
Correct. I think this is the analogous to what I call whose petri dish are you in, right?
Right.
So this is, I mean, the equivalent here is whose chessboard are you in, and who are the people in your chessboard. So this is like a plus infinity to minus infinity kind of thing there, where you control some things and you think you're the god of that chessboard, but then there's a chessboard above you and so on and so forth.
Right. And actually,
But,
maybe there are no. I'm sorry. There are no chessboards really. I mean, there are chessboards, but what we think is a strategy, or what we think is risk, or what we think our power is on that square, or depending on the location, may actually mean nothing.
Right.
But irrespective of which grid we are a part of, right? So which power nexus we are, just ploy in. As far as the self and other question is concerned, even if you are one chessboard above me in that sense, whatever is not you is the other, right? So that doesn't change. Even if, so I don't know if there is a power dynamics in the perception of the other, in the sense that is there a hierarchy of power? So the lower powered pawns on the chessboard under a particular chessboard, would it be less a part of the other, or is it flat?
So it's like the other is a monolith.
Right. I mean, that's what I would think,
Yeah.
and not so much of a surface with many holes like the envelope of the self is, right? So
I mean, maybe you identify with some others, though. I mean, if you have some identification of the self in some other, even if you were to try to break down the other, I guess when we talk about chessboard, it's like breaking down the other.
right, because of the battle, because of the conflict.
Struggles, yeah, whatever, power. But as a whole, yeah, I mean, anything that's not me is the negative space. I mean, we can choose to not explore the negative space in any terms and just accept that it's a negative space. Or we can,
Right.
yes, yeah.
Without differentiating, without
Yeah.
creating levels.
Yeah, that's one way.
Do you think others can be a part of the wholes that we described yesterday? Like,
Yeah, I would, in my opinion, if we are going in that direction, if we are trying to break down the other, then there will be some links between the self and the other through these holes. Or through some other new holes or some other new thing.
But how does that help us in a way respond to where we were yesterday, and which was, how can we be ourselves? So what helps us? Does specifying the other help us, or does it help us to just consider it flat, like one entity?
I
Right.
think.
You think specifying helps us?
No. From what you said, I mean, you referred to a hierarchical structure and power and all that stuff, right?
Right.
So it is under the influence of power structures that we are not able to be ourselves, in my opinion, right? But if you look at
Right.
the negative space, and you come to the conclusion that the negative space is filled with entities that are just as important as you, not less or more. That's what makes it a flat structure, right? If that is the case, then you have more of a chance to be yourself
Right.
than otherwise.
But if you perceive that there are all these others, you could be
Right.
inhibited.
So
in
you are
yourself.
saying that.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the inhibition that you just spoke of, Satya, the inhibition comes from these power structures and these power hierarchies. If whatever meditation we do, and I'm using meditation in a very cognitive kind of sense,
Like observation, sort of.
yeah, whatever observation we do, if it comes out with the result that there are other entities out there who are just as important as you, or just as influential as you, or just as vulnerable as you, then you will be much more comfortable being yourself, is my submission.
But that might actually put me off because I might have a sense of self where I, you know, I don't want other people to be as important as me, right? So it might actually put me off to think like that.
Why do you say that?
Right. No, but that takes us in a very that takes us to a space which again we were
Yeah.
in the last few days, but we never mapped it. So the effect of noise in the environment. So one was the clamming up, so inhibition. One was anger, so you want to dominate it by making more noise. But so you are saying that at this point, if I want to dominate, and domination generally necessarily has a hierarchy. So if you want to dominate, and I'm saying that, oh, we are the same, then it won't work.
So I guess what I was trying to say was, if there is who realizes, who wants to express the self. I'm sorry, Obtuse, am I interrupting Obtuse? I don't know.
No, you're not.
There's
I'm just.
Okay.
there's noise. Yeah. Yeah. Please continue.
Okay, when are we ourselves was the question. When can we be ourselves? And the one thing that we're talking about right now is everyone else is equal to me. That's when I can be myself.
Right.
But
And
if
you are saying that
everybody,
doesn't work.
it may not. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm saying it may not, because if everybody is the same, what's the distinction between me and the others? So where does the self
Right.
even come then?
So how do I differentiate?
Yeah, the question is, do I want to differentiate? And if I do, how do I?
Right. I mean, because in a very organic way, the self, the individuation process, the formation of the self process happens through differentiation at first, right? So
Yeah.
we can't totally give up on differentiation, because when we do that, then the self won't even form.
Right.
I think like others can be same as the self, but their perspectives can be different. That's when I can be myself, when I hear different perspectives or encounter
This
different
the
point of view.
perspectives of what? Perspectives of
Perspectives of others again, like for them, I think there is some common intersection space on how like for the other, as you said, like for two people, right? or two selves, the other what both of them can talk about have some common intersection point. And when I know about their perspective about that intersection point, that's when I can be myself. Did I make sense? I don't think so.
Yeah, to me, yes. Uh, as in, this is how I perceived what you said.
Uh-huh.
Uh, like we talked about how it
Right.
is completely mm, completely natural to have this differentiation in the first place,
Uh-huh.
to for the formation of self.
Right.
And my way of building this formation, or my way of mm, clearing or defining this differentiation to me, how I'm different from others,
Right.
is something uh, that essentially makes me different from others. As in, others, let's say, just a quick question. By others, do we mean people, or is it limited to just living entities, or it can be any pixel in the negative space?
I think
I'm
it can
personally
be
looking at the third one, any pixel.
any pixel,
Okay.
yeah.
So, what I'm saying is that pixel, uh, let's assume that that's a rational entity, whatever that pixel is. That pixel would also have a way of differentiating itself from its own negative space,
Right.
and that way would might be different than how I look at myself, and those two different ways would make this structure essentially rough, as in not something that's flat.
So everyone won't be equal essentially. So you are saying that the contrast will naturally emerge. So differentiation will happen and the self will be formed. So
Yes.
right. So JK, how do you respond to that? The idea of everyone being the same somehow seems difficult to model.
So here's what I'd like to add. Yes, it is important for us to differentiate ourselves to be individuals, but I have a feeling that this should come full circle, where you differentiate yourself to figure out who you are, and then as you evolve, you start realizing that while everything may not be the same, everything is of equal importance, and then you go back to being a part of the larger entity. Maybe that is what the
Yeah.
cycle of life is about.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd agree with that. That I keep thinking of Siddhartha's life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're very clearly using the words of equal importance and not same, right? So it's not a question of equality like
Yeah.
democracy falsely promises. It's more an idea of equal importance.
Yeah, equal
Right.
importance. I mean, it is our power structures that give different things different degrees of importance, right? Now, I'll take an example. This can be extended to most things. The work that a potter does and the work that a banker does are different, very clearly different. But
Hmm.
in a society that didn't have hierarchy, they would be just as important.
But in an economic system,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
An economic system necessarily requires
A
to
hierarchy.
accept and make peace with the idea of hierarchy.
Mhm.
Yeah, for flow to happen, there has to be ups and downs.
Yeah.
So how would you reconcile your the model that you are proposing with the idea with economics? I mean, with exchange.
Yeah, so there's two kinds of exchange, right? There is barter, like it used to be in the old days,
Right.
and there is this current economic regime that we live in, which basically I mean, the regime that we live in today is, honestly, in my opinion, an artificial regime where a few people have appropriated all the wealth and they're just doling it out in small installments to every one of us.
But do you find natural systems other than human, like the animal kingdom, so to say, do you find that their economic systems are absent from their society if they have a social system?
I don't know enough about that to comment, but I will comment based on something that I've seen. Let's say the native Indians in the U.S., for example, their societies didn't have these level of structures, right?
Right.
Sorry, what are you referring to?
I was referring to the native Indians in in what is today called the United States of America. They seem to have lived in a reasonably peaceful equation with not just their surroundings but the others around them. There was enough respect given to everyone's profession, everyone's importance, and things like that. So
but there's always something that is of value, right? That gets traded, or do you think that trade doesn't happen? I mean, currency can be different.
But there's always some attribution of value to some tangible entity. As in, today it's the currency or the coins or Indian rupees or whatever it is.
Right,
But
value
even,
is always there.
Yeah.
So there's economics in some way or the other.
Yeah, I think what JK is saying is attribution of value to something quantifiable is what is playing the game. As in, if you look at the barter system, where I want to exchange my commodity X with Y, Y being in possession of someone else, and X is with me. So there's no standard quantifiable rule between X and Y, unless and until we two meet and talk about it. Whereas today, if I want to have X or Y, I know what the MRP is. Is that what you're saying, JK?
Yeah. No, I want to add one more thing here. Saying yes, the economic value is important, but if you go back to a time where we weren't living in this hyper marketing kind of a world, there was a method of realizing the true value of a certain object or a certain service. What's happened today is that a few people, because of the power hierarchy, have appropriated all the wealth, and they are now determining what has value and what doesn't have value. Earlier, I think there was a system where society as a whole determined what was valuable and what was not, or what the gradation of value was.
But ultimately, there is value, right? There is value and there is high and low values. How it is determined still doesn't matter.
Yeah, there has to be that differentiation in value for transaction to take place.
Right.
Could someone just quickly tell me this economic perspective on how we define others? Or is it just a lens that we're talking about?
No, so I understand this economic perspective in the sense that looking at the other as a flat space with everyone being of equal importance is what as JK suggested this model as different from an other which is basically one entity or the other in which there are levels of of power dynamics and hierarchy, whatever.
Right.
But what I would say is that no matter which time we look at, there was always a hunger for growth, right? There was always a hunger for progress. And that is the reason why from then we have reached now. So, and that hunger for growth, progress, whatever, has been at the cost of creating even synthetic or whatever, some power dynamic, some hierarchy, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
And it's become cancerous now.
right. I mean, that's the only way we know of growing. So, an economic viewpoint of the Native American lifestyle would be that, the Europeans came and they had more money and more progress, and they outwitted them and conquered the land. So, I mean, capitalism has this inherent rationalization, which is survival of the fittest, which is a very brute kind of logic, right? So it's brute in the sense that it accepts that what we want is growth, and if growth has to happen, then this is the cost we have to pay.
Right. Versus if you think of life, if its goal is to survive, it's not talking about growth. It is just talking about sustenance.
Right.
Sustenance versus growth. So health versus stability kind of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, there's almost a rare prevalence of obesity and outside humans, in the sense, you find it's rare to find animals hoarding food that they don't immediately need or something like that.
Right.
So what you're saying, health, once that state is achieved, then maybe there is a nullification of all further desire.
Right. There's a flattening.
I want to make actually I want to play devil's advocate here. This is not what I believe in, but I'll say it regardless. Imagine that this conversation that we are having now was happening in let's say 500 years ago in what we now call US, and there was this system where people cared didn't care about GDP growth and things like that. Would we still have had a problem defining the self and others in that situation? That's part one. Part two is we are having this conversation now and saying that the way we are living now is cancerous. But could some future look back on today and look at it as the ideal society?
I think future looking back, yes, certainly. I mean, it's all perspectives, right? Like it depends on what the goal is, what is the prevalent cultural, social, whatever goals, right? So yeah, absolutely. This could be utopia for somebody. And like what we are looking back on, same thing. We don't, like you said, I mean, the conversation on self and other may have been different in the past, yeah. Because it's the structures, and it depends on what value is given to what. We are saying now that we have a few people hoarding all the wealth on top of, the wealth is in the hands of few people. It used to be like that in the past too. It's like almost we have gone back to that state. The kings had the control.
Right. I would like to throw light on this from a different standpoint, sort of. As in, I would like to say that the regime that I'm living in right now, I would prefer that over the earlier Native American sort of thing, in the sense that even then, as Satya is saying, power structure was there, and attribution of value was, instead of GDP and economic growth, it was given to different tangible entities like human blood, bird feathers in Native American culture. So there used to be human sacrifices and things like that, where kings or the rulers were analogous to the people in today's context who have appropriated all the wealth and who are playing around with the world, so to say. So to look at it from a neutral standpoint, I would say that today I'm valued or I'm judged by the others based on what skills I possess or what uh, value I might add to the system, as opposed to the earlier times when people might have judged me based on what totem or tribe do I come from,
So
and
you
of
are saying that we live in we live in a meritocracy, right? Like we
yes,
our merit decides our value. You are saying that.
as opposed to the earlier times. As in, what I'm saying is, power structure essentially has to be there, be it any point of time in the history of civilizations, as long as there is a group of people uh, harvesting the land and or or even claiming the land and living there instead of being nomads and like differentiating themselves from wild animals. There has to be a power
Yeah.
structure.
So even in the matrix, even in our projections of the future, the matrix, we have power dynamics and we have a very
Hmm.
clear line of control. And even in the machines we design, which needn't actually have no inherent need to mirror the power systems, power structures we live in, also mirror those back. But uh, so, would you then say that the view of the other
Hmm.
as parts of equal importance? Would you say that then that is utopian?
Of equal importance. Uh,
To the present, is it what you're saying, Prayas?
No, to the self, right? So,
To
in
the
the
self.
sense that when you feel that everyone else has equal importance in the system, which
Mhm.
is right, do you think basically that that's not possible?
It could be seen as utopian in one way, but in another way, if you look at it as the universe being indifferent, then actually it just is. Everything is equally important, everything is equally not important.
So the scale matters. At a large enough scale, things lose.
Not even that, it's more like which perspective are you taking? If you're taking the perspective of social and cultural definitions of what utopia is, then it might look idealistic and attached with
Right.
it.
So
But
if you take away the personal
yeah,
context and color and flavor, right? So
yes.
if you in a way render these concepts as being dry and devoid of subjective layering of stories, but
Yeah.
is that possible? Is it possible to? I mean, I think so far we have stayed within the narrative folds of looking at things in their objective dryness rather than their, the subjective emotion or intensity. But I wouldn't know if that is realistic or that is safe.
Personally, I would say looking at it like that actually gives us a new perspective because by habit, we tend to look at things with our lens of emotion or whatever it is, whether we accept it or not. But I feel like having that dryness is also an important perspective if the goal is to identify what the self is.
So
That's my opinion.
do we move ahead with our model of the other being of paths with equal importance, or do we configure that a little bit?
Both are looking interesting to me.
Yeah.
But what is more interesting at this point is the flatness, actually. Because in our realistic situations, we tend to deal with power structures and all this all the time. So to not have any of that just seems more interesting.
Yeah.
Can I add something to this flatness argument? See, you talk about power structures and the fact that they've always existed and all that stuff. My opinion is that power structures are formed when there is scarcity of something. Right? Now, the question that we might need to answer is, are there absolute scarcities that people are then taking advantage of, or are people creating the illusion of scarcity so that they can hold on to power? That might help in the way that we deal with the world, because you might have a situation where an entity is trying to create an illusion of scarcity and therefore take power.
Yeah, very
But
much.
if you don't buy into that, they're not giving away power.
Exactly. Yeah. If you don't fall for certain perceptions or certain pyramid schemes and you look through it, then yeah, that's right. Then you don't fall for it.
So is our social systems essentially pyramid schemes? Because they engulf you at some level and they make you part of the game in a way that you are assigned a role, and then you fulfill the needs of the system and not of yourself in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a choice you make, right? Like you might want to fulfill your own needs by either partaking of the larger pyramid or creating your own pyramid, or it's a choice you make. So, I mean, do you participate in the power structures or what do you do? And like we had talked earlier about not being I think Akshay had talked about this is not one pyramid, it's like multiple pyramids feeding into each other.
No, but then we said it's compulsive, right? It's a compulsive game. So I think choice is illusion, based on what we spoke about like a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago.
Right, but and so at this point we are looking at the other as consisting of lots of paths which are of equal importance, and that helps us feel ourselves. So that helps us be ourselves, because we have accepted everything and let it be rendered in equal importance. But how is this act performed, right? So you can describe that if you think this will happen, right? So if you're happy, then you're happy. But then how do you be happy, right? So how do you picture everything in equal importance? I mean, I think that itself is even if you accept that does help you feel, that does help you be yourself, but how do you do that?
How do you picture everything as of equal importance? Is it what you are asking, Prayas?
Yeah, so how do you disengage from power play to basically connect it to what Satya was just saying? How do you not participate or participate in power play in that sense? So if you're considering everything to be of equal importance, yeah.
Right. So I want to add something here that might be a topic for a further discussion. But I think what we do when we are talking about such things is we confuse two very different entities. One is happiness and one is peace. Right? So
Right.
Yeah.
when you, I mean, my opinion is that when you say happiness, it automatically has that negative possibility of sadness in it, right? Whereas if you actually look at everything as equal, what you will attain is peace. You can't look for happiness and equate it to peace. It doesn't work that way. If you're looking for happiness, there is the possibility of sadness, and that happens in an
Right.
unequal society.
So what you're saying is if I accept that things are unequal, then everything becomes equal.
Yeah,
And
if you
that's
choose not to participate in that game, then you will find peace, but you cannot say you will find happiness there.
No, but is that choice for you to make? So can you actually just not play the game suddenly? I mean, because the game is compulsive. You know, like we looked at it a few days back, and so then if it's compulsive, that means that you can't. The key is not in your hands. You can't just suddenly snap out.
So I feel like if you're participating, but you're aware that you are participating and that this is what it is, you accept that things are not equal. That acceptance, there is a key to peace in that acceptance. Is that what you're saying, JK?
Yeah. So what? The corollary here is you said there are many different pyramids also, right? So what you can choose is which pyramid you want to play in, right? So you might have the ability to play the game at the top most pyramid, but you are choosing not to do it because you know the downsides that come with it.
Yeah.
I think that differentiation between happiness and
Yeah, that was just an example. I mean, I was
very important.
yeah, I just gave that example in terms of in how do you give an instruction set for a thought, right? So happiness is a grand idea, which is beyond the course of conventional game world rewards. So happiness is something which is which is perceived to be very fleeting.
Correct.
And so, but then can this understanding of acceptance of everything to be of equal importance not be fleeting? So, how would you characterize this acceptance?
Yeah, it does feel less fleeting to me because then you're aware of what is fleeting and what isn't also.
So then you have this perspective, and then you're able to be yourself, right?
Perhaps, yes. Or at least you're on the threshold of finding out who yourself is.
Right, because you are you're still in the picture, so you are only at the threshold. You're not actually being yourself yet.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it removes the noise that might help in your self-discovery.
Right.
But then the next stage of the puzzle is modeling other perspectives, right? So in the sense you're switching frames. So the whole game of perspective studies is worth playing because you can at some point be switching, right? So you can look at any one thing in a million different ways, and by doing that you understand it more.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like the idea of flatness helps with that switching of perspectives because if you look at everything as of equal importance, then it wouldn't be that difficult to switch perspective to something else. Whereas if you thought that something else is of not that much of an importance, then you wouldn't even care to switch to that perspective.
Right.
But the switching exercise, the episode of switching is almost always, even if you had accepted that everything is equal, in the switching experience that will change, because when you accept that everything is equal and you still have yourself, right? So you still retain yourself, then it's fine. You're not in that much of a danger, right?
Okay.
But when you have to give up yourself and accept, I mean, you're giving up your perspective, not yourself, but you're giving up your frame and accepting another frame that you're going to wear. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel then it's a dangerous, then it's a vulnerable moment, right?
It is,
So,
yes, it is scary.
and that, so that performance of switching is actually, yeah, when you have to switch, you will always feel a sense of love for your own frame
Yeah.
or attachment for your own frame. So I'm not sure if the flatness helps here, because the flatness evaporates.
Yeah, so you're saying that the self becomes more important than the other.
Especially when you have to leave it, like especially when you are about to die, you actually, you might discover that, you know, life is really worth living.
Right. Right. But
Also,
then, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, what I was thinking was, let's say I assume that the things are flat and every single pixel is of equal importance. Why would I switch then? As in, first thing, and secondly, if at all I want to switch, uh, to what position will I jump to after switching? As in, if everything is of equal importance, uh, how will I choose then to, as in, what to switch to? As opposed to that, if I see things as not flat, then I'll understand that something is of greater importance than another. Then I'll have this curiosity of switching to that thing.
No, I don't understand why the need to switch. If you can move up the reference frame, then you'll realize that a mountain is just as important as the sea, even though the mountain is at a different level than the sea. So the sea does not have to suddenly shift to the mountain's perspective. What it has to do is get out of its own perspective, and then it'll all become clear.
But getting out of its own perspective means going somewhere else, right? Which could be a mountain.
Yeah. So I mean, if you look at it from the old chessboard analogy that we talked about, the more you see, the more you realize that, I mean, if all of us are as important, all our jobs and all our activities are just as important. If you stay within yourself, confined by the traditions and the values that you've been given, regardless of whether you travel around or not, if you stay, for example, you will never see. Are you guys there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
your voice was breaking a bit, so we're just waiting for it to come back.
Okay. Okay.
I think from what I understood, it is like the process of exploration is necessary for understanding. So switching those perspectives is,
Correct.
yeah.
It's part of the exploration. So, you know,
Yes.
you would, once you get into the game a little bit, you want to verify that what you're seeing is really what you're seeing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And then you don't trust your senses anymore. So
Yeah.
you want to try on different lenses to see if it's still the same.
Yeah. And it could be a random lens. I mean, the decision may just be a throw of a die.
Right. So, and for that to happen, because the switching is our idea for tomorrow, which is also a concluding day, and so we have to, in a way, connect what we are talking about today to that idea. And so I think the idea of the other needs to be one which allows this switching in a painless, or rather in a self-facilitating manner. And what Dhruv was suggesting, I think, was that if you have this current economic system where aspiration and desire are the motivations for switching, I mean, that seems to explain where we are right now, but that doesn't seem to really offer another model like the equal importance model was in that sense, right? So I don't know if you can configure that equal importance model a little bit to account for switching.
So I feel like if we see everything outside of us as flat, then it seems accessible. I can actually venture and go and explore it.
Right. So there is also less less aversion or less resistance from the
Yeah.
other frames.
Yeah.
I think this smoothness and the roughness, whatever conflict we're having, I think it's more like there is roughness, but when you look at others, you apply this blur function to the roughness so that it makes you look at it as smooth, and then you can easily venture into it, and then that enables you to like encounter a different perspective. I think the transition, just to make a transition, you need to apply this blur filter and look at things as smooth.
Right. So for the
That's what I
transition to yeah, that
So
makes
when
sense.
so when you are getting to know someone new, you have to think of them as being very good to facilitate the formation of an exchange and of a relationship. So what you're saying is that we lubricate the switching by the investment of hope. Is that what you're saying?
I don't understand why you should alter your perspective, identity, just to perhaps make the other more comfortable or acceptable. Or I don't see why one has to do that. If you're integrated well enough, you'd be who you are, and that's good enough for the other. Because why do you have to change yourself?
No, we're
Your
not.
perspective. You're saying you have to. Prayas mentioned something that you have to make the other comfortable by.
No, I was saying that, so I'll go back to the problem that I stated, as saying that the switching exercise is inherently problematic because when you are taking on another frame, you are in a way giving up your own. And then you have all these, you have attachment issues, right? So you want to hold on to your frame. So that discourages you from switching in the first place.
But
Can
that's
we
an
use the
assumption.
word empathy here?
Can
I
we use
think
the word?
empathy.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
to
I think
take
it's
on
all integrated. Sorry, go ahead, Satya.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was saying if you are integrated, you don't have to adjust your frame at all because you see the cohesion or the coherence between different frames, right? And you don't have to alter your frame or switch or make transitions from hard to smooth or none of that. You see the whole picture. You see it as is. You don't have to alter your perspective at all. I mean,
No,
I
but
don't
how do you
understand.
see the scene as is?
By merely
As it is.
observing, as it unfolds, you merely give it time and you observe. You don't judge We don't try to alter your perspective or try to understand by changing.
But
your
that
point
will
of view.
always be from the limitation of our own perspective, from our own frame. So, I mean,
I feel like if you're an integrated self, then you will not have trouble retaining yourself when you look at another
Something
perspective.
other. Correct. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, but then to see something else, it might help to empathize with the other, with the else. And by empathy, I mean putting on a new perspective on your existing perspective. And
but why would you call it empathy and not
Yeah. It's not necessarily.
hope?
Or I don't see why
hope
empathy
is
or
kind of
hope.
same, right? Like that. This is the transition we are talking about, and we were just talking about how to make the transition smoother.
Yeah.
If we want to make the transition, if we want to do that, then maybe it's one way.
What
So
I fail
empathy
to
and hope are same, you're saying?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
what I fail to understand is why we view it as a confrontation to begin with.
It's not a confrontation as a negative confrontation, right? It's a meeting of two things. But I'm not able to see how you are not. I mean, I need to understand what you're saying.
Now we are trying to throw in empathy and hope. Now, when do you hope? When you're despairing? When you,
No, it's not. I wouldn't give it a color. I wouldn't give empathy a color. And even hope. I mean, it's not hope as in an emotional hope. It's more like a sense that I can understand. I can attempt to understand the hope that I can understand.
So mere openness to another frame.
It makes it easier for me. Yeah, openness. Yeah, openness is a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, openness does the same thing for us. We basically, during the switching, we basically don't want the self to shut down and not.
Openness really destroys our frame.
But if you are integrated, it won't, no?
Yeah, momentarily it sort of suppresses our frame and.
Yeah, and you will have what you were saying about an integrated individual. So in that moment of destruction, in a way, you will know that this is temporary. Right, and that your frame you will assume your frame again in some time.
Which moment of destruction? The destruction of our frame?
No,
yeah, so you know when our frame is displaced by another frame.
Okay.
At that point, you know that this other frame, this new frame, is going to also be displaced back by your own frame in some time, if you want.
I think transformation is a better word than destruction. I don't see how.
Yeah, destruction is malicious.
Or fusion.
It seems to imply a will. Fusion. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is this act of switching that we will go deeper into tomorrow, as you know. That's the topic for tomorrow, and that's where we have arrived at today. So that's we are in a good place, and we'll actually attempt to see how this happens in our personal experience, right? So in a way, is this switching really happening very fluidly if you're just open or empathetic, or is it more complex than that, right? So I think tomorrow we can bring in more openings into the switching experience. Thanks everyone for being part of the discussion tonight. And I hope you're part of the discussion tomorrow night. That's the last day of the Perspective Studies study group, and it was great to have you back.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Priyas.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.